The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
I think this is happening and it's bad, and conservative-minded people, especially legal conservatives such as myself, should say, no, we have to safeguard the justice system.
Then, later on The Agenda.
So you can understand then why governments like it. They get a lot of business done quickly. You can understand why the opposition typically doesn't like them, because there's a lot of targets to shoot at and they can't focus on a single one.
Also tonight.
In some of the studies, we're seeing 2/3 of people are having what's called a mystical experience. And that's where like the normal boundaries of the self really start to dissolve, and people describe sort of merging with the universe. There can be this profound positive mood, bliss, unity.
In some countries, judges are elected and affiliated with political parties. Here, they are appointed by the government of the day. Traditionally, the idea has been that they should be nonpartisan, independent, and make decisions based on the law and the merits of the case. So, when Premier Doug Ford recently indicated that he wanted to appoint, quote, like-minded judges to sit in Ontario courtrooms, the hackles went up in the legal community and beyond. With us for more, in the nation's capital, Michael Spratt. He's a partner at the Ottawa criminal law firm Abergel, Goldstein and Partners. He's served as a director of the Criminal Lawyers Association. In Belleville, Ontario, Mitch Heimpel, director of policy at the public affairs firm Enterprise Canada. And here in our studio, Joanna Barron, executive director of the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Joanna, it's good to have you here in the studio. And to our friends in Points Beyond, thank you for joining us tonight on TVO as well. Well, the Premier has really caused a bit of a foofara here. And I guess it mostly started when he indicated that for the Appointments Committee that recommends judicial appointments to the government, he is going to install, or has installed, 2 former employees of the Progressive Conservative government on that committee. Let's play some tape. Sheldon, if you would.
We got elected to get like-minded people in appointments, and by the rules, you can't have lawyers picking judges, so you have to have citizens. I'm not going to appoint some NDP or some Liberal. Every single appointment I can to find tough judges, tough JPs, to keep guys in jail, and I say guys because 99.9% are guys, I'm going to do it. So that's part of democracy.
What'd you think?
Well, I think there's democracy. It may be a little bit too much democracy. I think that probably there's some internal polling that is suggesting to Premier Ford that this is a winning issue for him, particularly the part about the tough on crime. The trouble is that tough on crime is not in and of itself a judicial philosophy. And so I think while this may be good short-term politics, it's bad in the long term for the perception of the judiciary.
Mitch, what'd you think?
I think the Premier's main problem might have been that he told the truth. For a long time, governments in this country have appointed people who are of a particular persuasion relative to their own to the bench. We saw this a couple of years ago when 5 out of 6 appointees in New Brunswick were either friends, family members, or recent donors of Dominic LeBlanc, who's now the the public safety minister. So this isn't new, and Premier Ford's not the first minister to do it.
Michael, there is kind of a funny line in politics, which is the definition of a mistake is a politician accidentally saying something true out loud. So is that really what's gone on here?
No, this is actually something new, something that we haven't seen in Ontario. Ontario has what has long been considered the gold standard for appointing judges, the Judicial Appointments Advisory Committee. And what we've seen this government do, dating back to when Doug Downey, Ontario's AG, was first appointed, we've seen the government not only appoint people that they think will advance an agenda, which is problematic in and of itself, but we've seen this government actually change the rules about how those judges are appointed. And that sort of systemic erosion of a very important nonpartisan institution that provides a safeguard to guard against partisanship is what makes this so different and so disturbing.
Well, I'm going to call a bit of an audible here. I was going to play this later, but Sheldon, if you would, middle of page 2, we've got that Doug Downey clip. The Attorney General was on this program a few years ago, and we talked about this sort of broadening of the pool that he wants to do from which to pick judges. So let's roll that now.
There are two parts to the appointment of judges. One is to decide whether they're qualified or not qualified, and that's really important. But the second part is for me to pick people who, reflect some of the values that I have. And I want to put some of those in the regulation so people understand, understanding victims' issues, making sure that they have community leadership, making sure that those pieces are there. And sometimes only I can assess that. And I don't know why, as Attorney General, I'm allowed to do a ton of things, but I'm not allowed to pick from a bigger pool of people who a third-party committee say are qualified.
Now, that's more than 4 years ago he's saying that. So in some respects, there's nothing new in this, is there?
Well, I think that it's a subtle escalation, right? It's different to say that we're looking for judges that have a certain swath of broadly defined values and saying we're looking for judges that are in lockstep with us, that share our political views. I'm not going to be looking at liberal or NDP. So I think that there is a subtle escalation here, and I think it has crossed a line where it's going into the perception and legitimacy of the judiciary.
Mitch, a bit of an escalation in your view also?
Not really. I mean, the Premier's been fairly clear about what he perceives as some of the issues with the judiciary. You talk about bail reform, you talk about mandatory minimum sentences, things of that nature have come up in particular in recent conversation. But it's not like if you're a conservative in this country, you believe that the judiciary was perfectly nonpartisan or perfectly non-ideological before. It seems to, in this case, only be an escalation because it's a conservative government doing it.
Okay, Michael, is that a fair point?
No, it's not. I mean, we can say that, yes, different governments have appointed people who may reflect certain values, but what this government has done is that they've messed around with an independent committee to get more control so that they can appoint judges who pass a political purity test. Never before have we had an attorney general or a government say, you won't be a judge if you're a liberal or if you're conservative, if you're an NDP, whatever that means. And we want judges who will keep people in jail, who will lock people up, and who will be tough on crime. That's very disturbing when, in this context, when Doug Ford has a majority government, the only way to hold him to account is through the courts to some respect. And so that's what makes this different and disturbing and not like those other cases at all.
Okay, Joanne, I'm going to push back a little bit on this because, every government that comes into power wants to be surrounded by friendly people. It doesn't want to, it wants people who will enable its agenda. Why would the courts be any different from any other aspect of life where a government will plug people into various institutions in order to get their program through?
Well, I think judges would tell you that judges are quite a bit more difficult to control in this way. They're much less predictable. Just ask Stephen Harper, who appointed judges, and they did not end up siding with him on safe injection sites or prostitution or any of these issues. And furthermore, I think the judiciary is rightly meant to rise above polarization and politicization. So it's something that it's not just the fact of it, but also the perception of its independence is very important in a polarized society.
Yeah, Mitch, this might not have been as big a thing as it's turned out to be had the Premier not wanted to appoint two of his former employees to this committee that makes recommendations. Was that a step too far in your view?
There are no limitations really on who the Premier can appoint, aside from the fact that the Courts of Justice Act requires they not be lawyers or judges when they're appointed by the Attorney General. They just have to be laypersons. So, no, their prior or current employment history has no bearing on whether or not they're suited for the job.
Michael, do you have a problem with either one of those appointments?
Yeah, because what we have to realize is that the criminal justice system isn't some fully formed ideal that's been handed down on stone tablets and is perfect. Our justice system in Canada, the important democratic institution, relies on public trust and public confidence. And when you have someone saying out loud that they're only going to appoint political friends. And when you have someone changing the committee about how those people are appointed and putting members on that committee that may erode public trust and public confidence, that undercuts the important function and functionality of our courts. Our courts' decisions only have meaning if we all believe that they have meaning. And what we've seen here, especially with Doug Ford, doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on this and spreading misinformation about what's happening in our courts, is we're seeing what begins to more and more look like an intentional sowing of public distrust. And that's very, very dangerous and unprecedented.
Well, Joanna, let me follow with you on this issue of partisanship. You know, Liberals in Ottawa when I was younger, Liberals were always in power in Ottawa and Tories were always in power at Queen's Park. And you saw a lot of provincial judges that, you know, obviously had some Tory credentials, and you saw a lot of Liberal judges with Liberal credentials. Hasn't the Premier just basically said out loud what has been going on for decades and decades in this province and country?
I think to some extent, yes. And so I'm kind of in between Michael and Mitch, where I agree with Mitch that this is nothing new. There was a major National Post reporting this past summer that showed 76% of the federal Liberals' judicial appointees had a track record of donating to the Liberal Party. But I think Mitch is kind of saying, well, this is just happening, so let's just say it's okay. What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. I think this is happening and it's bad. And conservative-minded people, especially legal conservatives, such as myself, should say, no, we have to safeguard the justice system. It has to be preserved. So just because the Liberals are, you know, looking for partisans to appoint, it's not aspirational. It doesn't mean that everybody should just drop the appearance of trying to uphold an independent and impartial judiciary and do it as well. No, we should speak out on in both instances and not be hypocrites.
Fair enough. But Michael, isn't the key here that the appointee be able to do the job? If they happen to have partisan affiliations to the government of the day, okay, but isn't the main thing at the end of the day that they have the qualifications to do the job?
Well, I agree with Joanna that perception is very important, and that's what we need to guard against. And we've gone, I think, beyond that here for the reasons I've articulated. But if you look at how Canadian justice system has historically worked, it's not like we see south of the border, and we can talk about that. But we have seen here a history and a tradition of a judge being appointed to a lower court and then being elevated to a court of appeal or the Supreme Court by a different type of government. What Ford is saying is that would never happen under his watch, and that is disturbing. What we've also seen is, and you can point to individual examples, and certainly I've been critical of other governments, but under the previous Liberal government, we saw judicial appointments that broadly reflected sort of there was always a bit of partisanship, but generally reflected the idea that diversity on our bench is good. We saw about 50% prosecutors, 50% defense counsel appointed. Under the Ford government, we've seen 70% of the appointments have been prosecutors, 15% have been defense counsel, and almost a third of his appointments as Justice of the Peace have been former law enforcement officers. This is unprecedented. It doesn't reflect balance, and it doesn't reflect sort of the fiduciary duty, the trust that is placed in the Premier and the Attorney General to make these appointments in a nonpartisan way.
Mitch, to the best of my knowledge, those numbers that Michael just gave are accurate. Facts are facts. Do you think the balance is out of balance with these appointments?
No.
Why not?
When I look at public polling, the increased concern from a number of Canadians, advocates did a poll in the city of Toronto last week about a rise in violent crime, is worrisome to me. And a judicial system that protects victims, a judicial system that punishes violent crime, is something to be greatly desired. And so if you're more likely to get that judicial system because you appoint prosecutors to the bench who are more deferential to the legislature when it comes to mandatory minimum sentencing or bail reform, that to me is something that is the elected representatives of the province exercising their democratic mandate to reflect the will of the people when it comes to serious issues of law and order. And that's what they're supposed to do.
Joanna, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think as I say, tough on crime in and of itself is not a judicial philosophy. Mandatory minimums, bail reform, those are dealt with at the legislative level primarily, not by judges. Judges have a task of faithfully applying the law, and of course, having a prosecutorial and defense perspective are both important. It's important to have procedural due rights to ensure that the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt is adhered to. Finally, in terms of bail reform, we know that 80% of current inmates in Ontario are currently on remand, meaning they haven't actually been convicted yet. So I think that the issue is more complex than just don't let anybody out on bail. It seems that we already are not letting almost anybody out on bail, and so our jails are overstuffed with people who are still presumed innocent before the law.
Mitch, I got to say, the Premier's had a great time with this issue in the legislature over the past week. I mean, if you've watched any of question period, he is up on his feet expressing moral indignation and outrage at the state of the criminal justice system in the province today. And I have no doubt but that this sells brilliantly with the base of his Progressive Conservative Party. Is that what's going on here at the end of the day?
It's not just the base of his Progressive Conservative Party. If you look at, like I said, Abacus did polling in the city of Toronto last week, 65% of Torontonians believe that auto theft, for example, is somewhat or much worse than it was. 60% of Torontonians believe hate crimes are somewhat or much worse than they were. 60% of Torontonians believe violence on the TTC is somewhat or much worse than it was before. The idea that a concern about public safety or a concern about an increase in violent crime and therefore wanting a judicial system that is more likely to punish violent offenders is necessarily confined to Doug Ford's base is not reflected in any public opinion research. It's broadly popular at supermajority levels. Okay, fair enough. Let me come at, I'll do a follow-up with you, Mitch, and I'm going to come at this another way. I think it's fair to say that Madam Justice Rosalie Silberman Abella is one of the more progressive judges ever appointed in the history of Canada, and she rose to the Supreme Court of Canada. Funnily enough, she was appointed to the Ontario Court of Appeal by Progressive Conservative Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. Making that appointment doubly noteworthy was the fact that she moderated an election leaders debate in which she frequently cut Mulroney off in the middle of his answers because he was going on too long. Apparently, none of that fussed the Prime Minister very much at all. He said she was a quality appointment and put her on the bench. And her career speaks for itself. She's one of the most celebrated judges in Canadian history. Are we to understand that under the current circumstances with Doug Ford, that couldn't now happen? Not necessarily. Joanna made an excellent point off the top, which is that even if you want to put the right rails in place, whatever your view of the right rails are based on your partisan opinion or your political opinion, it's very difficult to predict what any lawyer will be like once they put a robe on. And not just Brian Mulroney found this, George H.W. Bush found this with David Souter, Dwight Eisenhower found it with William Brennan. Both of them appointed the most liberal justice, some of the most liberal justices in American history, and neither of them intended to. So once you appoint somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to act the way you believe they were, regardless of what you believe your process is weeding out. No, that is true. And who put Earl Warren on the U.S. Supreme Court? Was that Richard Nixon? That would also be Eisenhower. That was Eisenhower. And he was another Nixon disappointment to conservatives. First. Gotcha. That's right. Two Californians, right. Let me try this with you, Michael. You know, the Federation of Ontario Law Associations, the Ontario Bar Association, the CCLA, Civil Liberties Association, the Criminal Lawyers Association, they've all been very public in their criticism of the Premier's statements. I wonder if you are concerned about the fact that this might look like all the lawyers are ganging up on the Premier speaks for the people, the lawyers speak for themselves. What do you think?
Well, I think that these law societies, these law associations are quite right, because the one thing that we don't do, thank goodness, is deliver justice based on public polls. That is a recipe for disaster, and it's a recipe that Ford as a populist is courting. That's not how things work in Canada. And we can look south of the border to see what happens when you politicize the justice system. You know, when we appoint a judge in Canada, we don't necessarily know how they're going to decide things. It can't be more untrue in the United States, where you can look at who appointed the judge, the political climate of the day, and where the Republicans and Democrats are an issue, and you can predict with near certainty how a judge is going to decide things, because that judge may not be deciding based on the merits of the case, but based on political ideology. And that is a recipe for disaster in our courtrooms. And when we start down that path, as we've seen them do in the United States, you can't easily regain the public trust. And you look at the respect that people south of the border have for those important democratic institutions, you can see it's been damaged. And that is why these law societies, these law associations, the federations are speaking out against this. It's because we need to stop this before it gets away.
I should actually get all of you on the record as to whether you like or dislike the American style, which includes not only the partisan affiliation just referred to by Michael, but actually includes judges running, like politicians, for office. Mitch, what do you think? Could we use some of that here?
Oh God, I don't want judges to be elected. I really don't. Like, that just strikes me as a recipe for a lot of people to make money, and that's not good.
Okay, what about the rest of it, the partisan affiliation business?
I mean, I disagree with Michael's point in part because I think you can just look at the last 4 or 5 years and say that the Chief Justice in the United States has made a number of decisions, for example, that George W. Bush, who appointed him, probably wouldn't have agreed with. Like, judges do evolve in their judicial thinking over time. I think that the United States is in this particular situation because of decades of judicial rulings that have played on particular partisan and cultural cleavages in the United States that we don't necessarily have here. And so it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison. And also, I just generally disagree with the idea that we can use blanket anti-Americanism to explain why Canadian governments behave the way they do.
I think I know what you think about this, Joanna, but you want to go on the record?
Well, yeah, I think one big casualty of the U.S. system in all of its, elections and politicization, and we kind of know the fix is in, is that the U.S. is a country that could really use a body that could rise above partisan politics and decide the most divisive issues in society, which, for better or worse, it seems in both sides of the border, they could really use a body that would be above the fray and make decisions that would have common legitimacy, and it's exactly the opposite, right? Like, you can guess based on your party affiliation what you thought of the Dobbs decision, and that's really
the abortion decision.
Yes, the decision overturning Roe v. Wade, of course. That is the real value of a stable judicial system, right? Is that when we start to, start fighting about very tough issues, there is a body that can finally settle things for us. When you throw partisanship into that, you take out that whole benefit. So I would not like to see us go down that road.
Got a few minutes left here, so let's consider a different way. Michael, if you don't like the fact that the Premier put 2 of his former Premier's office employees on the committee that is going to help recommend judges, what's a better way to recommend judges for appointment?
Yeah, it's not just that I don't like that. I don't like that he made changes that allow him to reach down the list, get more names, so it's more easy for him to make partisan appointments. I don't like the fact that that can erode the public confidence in the justice system. The better way is to do what we've been doing for the last 40 years. Have a nonpartisan Judicial Advisory Committee where the government gets to appoint some members, where the law associations get to appoint some members, where we have lay people, and we do our best not to say that we're not going to appoint people based on their politics, or we're going to exclude people based on their politics, and we let that committee make a decision, and then the Attorney General can choose amongst the names that he's given. That has worked well. The Ontario Court of Justice, where these judges ultimately sit, is regarded as one of the highest level, best functioning, most rigorous, and busiest courts in the world. The appointments are beyond reproach. And when the government is trying to fix something that's not broken, the public should rightly be concerned that the fix is in. And that is dangerous.
Joanna, let me just, before I get you on this, the Attorney General now approves all but 3 members of this 13-member panel committee, and they are required, apparently, to present a short list of 6 candidates for each judicial vacancy. 6 now, used to be 2. Now it's 6. It's that deeper bench that Attorney General Downey was looking for. In your view, does that need to be changed?
No, I don't think that that's a problem. I don't think there's any problem with the Premier appointing former staffers. They may well have good knowledge of the needs of Ontarians and the sort of varying communities. I think, however, that it should be clear that this committee is looking for the best and most capable jurists, not people who think the same way as the Premier on one issue, which is tough on crime.
Is that the problem with the Premier's comments, is that they've given rise to the notion that sort of ideological affiliation as opposed to merit is what's at stake here?
I think so, yes. That's the nub of it.
That's the nub of it. Okay, Mitch, I'm going to give you the last word on this. Go ahead.
I don't necessarily think we have a problem with how we appoint judges. I don't. I think we probably have to be more honest with the Canadian public about who's doing that. And I think we probably have to be more honest about how that plays out in relation to the partisanship of the political and elected officials who then make these decisions. Like, we know from just the last government that there were members of this exact same committee that were appointed that had donation history with the Liberal government. That resulted in certain ends. It's also worth noting that we haven't changed the composition in terms of the number of lay persons who are appointed to this committee in over 20 years. So we've always had the ability for any Premier, regardless of party, to appoint lay persons, regardless of their political stripe, or let's face it, usually because of their political stripe, to this committee. Like, I don't actually think the problem here is process. I think the problem here is we've got people looking for a culture war where all we're doing is revealing things we've already done.
Well, we've had a very civilized discussion about this so-called culture war, and I want to thank the three of you for taking part. Michael Spratt in Ottawa, Mitch Heinpel in Belleville, Joanna Barron here in our studio. Good of all of you to join us here on TVO tonight. Thank you. What happens when a government wants to introduce a bill with a whole slew of different items that may not have anything to do with each other? Well, oftentimes they just throw everything but the kitchen sink into what's called an omnibus bill. The current Ontario government introduced just such a bill last week, so we thought we'd get Peter Lowen, the director of the U of T's Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, to join us and give us the ABCs of omnibus bills. Hi, Peter. How's your Latin these days? You going to be good for this?
Ready to go.
Excellent. Let's just start with the current omnibus bill at Queen's Park, because that's why we have you on. Is there anything about this that, in your view, is particularly new or unprecedented in what they're trying to do at Queen's Park today?
No, nothing too notable. I mean, what they're trying to do with the so-called Getting It Done Act is to amend a whole number of parts of different acts within the statutes in Ontario. Some of it has to do with banning the possibility of tolls on highways, apart from the 407. Other parts of it have to do with ensuring that there would have to be a referendum in the future if anyone wanted to introduce any new prices on carbon. And other parts have to do with things as exciting as like municipal boundaries. So it's a real grab bag of things, but it's not, in my view, kind of materially different than omnibus bills in the past have been.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, highways, carbon pricing, municipal boundaries, and a whole bunch of other things as well that don't, at first blush, really have anything to do with each other. So is this, for lack of a better word, appropriate?
Well, that's a matter of debate. And I'll be candid with you. Often the way this debate breaks down is that parties in opposition think that omnibus bills are bad, and parties in government think that they're good. And the reason is because they're typically, though not always, they're typically just sort of massive pieces of legislation which are touching on all sorts of different issues, often covered in different acts. So rather than being about just a single topic where it can be debated on something that's rather focused, omnibus bills are often about a whole number of things where the government's just trying to get a whole bunch of changes through in a short period of time. So you can understand then why governments like it. They get a lot of business done quickly. You can understand why the opposition typically doesn't like them, because there's a lot of targets to shoot at and they can't focus on a single one.
Mm-hmm. To your knowledge, is there any kind of limits upon an omnibus bill? You can only have X number of things in it, but not X plus Y.
So it's a great question. It depends a little bit on jurisdiction, and it depends on what a speaker rules. So the general rule, which has emerged principally in the federal parliament, is that there has to be a unifying theme that ties all of the things that are being done together. And in this case, I think you can find one. It is largely about administrative rules around transportation in cities, if you think those are kind of a similar thing. And I think they kind of reasonably are. But if you go too far and put together things that have no relationship to each other, an ambitious speaker may occasionally make it hard to get those bills on the agenda.
Well, admittedly here, we're going back a little more than 3 decades as I try to recall an example of what you just referenced. I think it was Mike Harris's government back in the 1990s that put I think it was Bill 26, an omnibus bill before the provincial parliament. And the speaker, even though he was a member of the Conservative government, he did say, you're going too far. So I guess there are lines that can be drawn here, eh?
Yeah, there are limits, and then there will be cases speaker will say you've got to take this thing and you've got to break it up. And often what you get then are essentially 2 omnibus bills that are going to come through. So it is under the speaker's discretion. I don't expect in this case that the speaker is going to push back on this particular piece of legislation, or these particular pieces of legislation, depending on how you think about it.
There you go. Just give I know you're not in the advice-giving business, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway, because if you're a member of the opposition, there may be some things in this omnibus bill that you say, well, I can live with that. I really don't like that. This is okay. I'd like to vote for it, but that's in there. I don't want to vote for it. If you're a member of the opposition, what do you do? Because you know if there's something in there that the public actually would really love to have happen, but you oppose this bill because you don't like omnibus bills, you've just handed the government a lot of material for their next election campaign.
Well, you have. In some cases, this isn't materially different than voting against any bill. Oppositions typically vote against bills. So if I were the opposition in either the 3 parties, and I was trying to figure out how to navigate my way through this, what I would do is I would clearly and publicly signal which things you agree with, which things you think are good ideas. Say it over and over again that, we're not opposing the government doing A, but we don't think B and C are good ideas, and effectively get yourself on the record. And then maybe take some consolation in the fact that typically voters don't pay super close attention to the details of what's being passed in various amendments or various parts of legislation. But I would put a flag up in terms of what you think is important and what you think you agree with, and then oppose the rest.
Yeah, the voters don't necessarily pay close attention to this, but you can bet the governing party that's putting it forward will, and it will give them lots of ammunition during future question periods to say, Mr. Speaker, the opposition party, they wouldn't even vote for these tax breaks that we had, or they wouldn't even vote for the single fare on public transit systems around. They're kind of stuck, aren't they?
Yes, this is the standard approach, right? Especially with omnibus bills. It happens with other bills, but the standard approach is put a lot of things in there and then force the opposition to vote against stuff that voters will otherwise think is popular. And that's a practice that I presume is about as old as omnibus bills, which go back a long, long way.
Well, in fact, I was going to raise another one here, and this one goes back to the late 1960s, where John Turner was the Minister of Justice at the time for Pierre Trudeau. And he had, I think in one omnibus bill, he wanted to change the rules around divorce. You used to have to get Parliament's permission to get a divorce in this country. Mm-hmm. He wanted to change the rules around homosexuality, which used to be illegal. And he wanted to change the rules around abortion, which was illegal mm-hmm. under all circumstances back then. And he put it all together in one omnibus bill. Now, interestingly enough, he didn't want to do that, but the Prime Minister forced him to do it. I guess we're many, many, many years after the fact here, but as you put your scholar's hat on and look at this, was it appropriate to put all those things together, which are individually very big, significant issues, all together in one bill?
Well, this gets to the general question of what parliaments are for, and whether parliaments are there simply to act as, not as rubber stamps, but as administrative bodies to move laws through, or if they're supposed to be the places in which deliberation and debate and exchange happen on important issues. And I guess in some ways, I feel like it's difficult to criticize governments for putting a bunch of legislation together, because parties on all sides of legislatures these days don't tolerate a lot of actual disagreement within their ranks. They're actually not much for deliberation. They're much more for performance. So, it's hard to fault governments in doing this, but I do think that omnibus bills are a part. They're not the only part, and maybe they're just a symptom, but certainly they're a part of parliaments which have become less adept at sorting through issues and becoming the arena where the public's representatives figure out what reasonable positions are, as opposed to positions arriving prepackaged and then simply yayed or nayed by otherwise unthinking members.
That's political scientist Peter Loewen, who has joined us from the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy downtown at the University of Toronto. Peter, always good to have you on the program. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Research underway at Toronto General Hospital employs an unconventional treatment for a range of mental health issues. Here's that story.
Hi, I'm Eric Bombicino. I'm a producer on The Agenda, and we are standing outside of Toronto General Hospital. And today we are going to be visiting the most beautiful room in this here hospital. This is where they're doing psilocybin-assisted therapy, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. This therapy is being used to treat a range of mental health disorders, from addiction to depression to anxiety related to terminal health diagnoses to OCD and even anorexia. I mean, the list goes on and on. We're here with Emma Hapke. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
She is the Associate Director of the University Health Network's Psychedelic Psychotherapy Research Group. Did I get that title right?
That's right, yeah. Thanks for coming.
This room is beautiful. You immediately feel the contrast from that hallway the second you walk in here.
We like to say it's the nicest room in the hospital.
Why does it matter so much to make this room so beautiful and calming for people?
So when people take a psychedelic medicine, they become very exquisitely sensitive to the environment around them. And the earlier researchers in the 1950s and 60s came up with this idea that set and setting really matter. And so the setting is this room, and it also is the therapist and the therapist's presence that creates this environment that ultimately allows the patient to trust and surrender to the psychedelic experience.
So I want to go through the process of the day of when someone does this. Let's pretend I'm going to be doing this therapy today. I walk into this room, I say, hi, Emma. I get into the bed. What happens next?
So one thing is, even before coming to the psychedelic session, you would have gone through a pretty intensive screening process and a minimum of usually at least 3 preparatory sessions. And the current model that we work with actually has 2 therapists for 1 patient. So when it comes to the day of your dosing session, your 2 therapists would meet you. Initially, we would start actually on the couch area, and we would chat with you, go over the agreements for the day, and kind of review your intentions and what you're hoping to get out of the session. We like to use some form of ritual to kind of mark the transition from ordinary to non-ordinary state of consciousness. So we'll use a koshi chime or a bell, and then you'll go to the bed. And at that point, you take the medicine. And then the next thing that happens is you'll put on headphones and an eye mask, and music starts. We have surround sound speakers, and the same music plays through the headphones. And you begin your inward journey. And depending on the medicine you take, that could be anywhere from 90 minutes to 8 hours. So psilocybin, one of the really common medicines that we work with, lasts on average about 4 to 6 hours for most people.
And as a therapist, you're there the whole time with them?
We are, yeah. That's part of why we work in pairs, so that we can take turns. We'll go and have lunch and use the washroom, because we want to make sure there's always at least one of us present. But really, for the majority, it's the 2 therapists there with the participant or the patient the entire time.
So I have a blindfold on me if I were to do this. Why a blindfold?
When people close their eyes on the psychedelic experience, it's very different than when they're oriented outward. So that encourages them to go inward. Right. And when we talk about psychedelic healing, we talk about this idea of the inner healing intelligence. It's just like our body kind of innately knows how to heal, our mind also wants to move towards wholeness. And what we encourage people to do is trust that their own inner healing intelligence is going to bring up the feelings, the memories, the experiences that are most in service of their healing. And so having that blindfold on really does encourage them to go inward. But people are also free at any point to take off their mask and chat with us. So it's not strict. We really follow really what works for them and their own intuition.
And then there's the music. Everybody loves a good DJ. How important is it to choose the right music, and how important is the role of music in this experience for people?
Yeah, so the music we think is really of critical importance to creating that overall setting for people. So we put a lot of time and thought into carefully curating playlists for our patients. We intentionally pick music that doesn't have lyrics in a language that they understand, because that will then take them out of the experience that they're having because they can understand the words. We want music that supports, both contains and supports flow. So it structures but also allows that opening and kind of easing in. One of the things that happens when you take a psychedelic like psilocybin is there's something called synesthesia, and that's where your senses start to kind of meld together, so people can actually hear colors or see sounds, which is it's hard to describe in that unless you've actually experienced it. And so the music really takes on these different chapters and really influences what people are feeling, seeing, hearing, experiencing.
So in terms of the healing that you're talking about, we'll have to go in here a little slow. There's lots to unpack. But what sort of experiences are people having during these sometimes 6-hour sessions?
So the first thing, that happens when you take a psychedelic is there's these perceptual changes. So people will see fractal patterns, bright colors, kaleidoscopes, but it's also, these are visionary medicines. And so people get visions of people, places, things, and even archetypal content like angels and demons. We go way beyond the norms of kind of Western psychiatry in terms of the types of visions that people get. The best way I like to describe it is it's like a waking dream. And so the other thing that happens when you take psilocybin is your ego, your normal sense of self, starts to dissolve away and soften. And for some people that can be quite scary. So we provide them a lot of preparation for that, and also just a lot of support on the day of. And as that normal sense of self starts to kind of dissolve away, lots of different things can come up. And no two psychedelic experiences are the same. But what we commonly see is these big pieces of emotion come up, and there's a lot of emotional catharsis and processing that happens. The other thing is a lot of biographical detail and past trauma can be brought up and actually re-experienced. People actually feel like they're right back there reliving it, but doing so in a contained environment with emotional support to process can help people release what was stuck in some of those past traumatic experiences, and that's part of the healing. We see this with psilocybin, and in some of the studies we're seeing 2/3 of people are having what's called a mystical experience. And that's where like the normal boundaries of the self really start to dissolve, and people describe sort of merging with the universe. There can be this profound positive mood, bliss, unity. People talk a lot about love and the healing power of love. And they have a lot of insights that they bring back from those mystical experiences that we then try to help them weave into their lives.
So there's this old saying that I love called, if you resist, it persists. If you resist this pain that you've pushed down, it will persist. And so is a good way of looking at this therapy is people are able to access buried feelings, even traumas that they may not even know were there.
So we use the term, it helps people overcome experiential avoidance. A lot of what keeps people stuck is it's human nature to want to avoid pain and go towards pleasure. And so we push down and look away from all of the difficult past things that have happened to us, but they're still affecting us on many ways. And so this, with the help of the medicine, it's like we're almost forced to look at what's there. And we learn that actually when we look at it, we can work through it. A sense of mastery emerges, and people are then supported to process those really difficult things. And ultimately that leads to a lightening and a lessening of their pain.
Is this a grieving process? This helps jumpstart people have great losses in their lives, and this you can see them beginning a grieving process in that bed sometimes?
Yes, very much so. We see, I think grief is one of the indications for which psilocybin therapy is, we're seeing it's particularly helpful for. We work a lot with people at the end of life, often treating people who are dying as young, in their teens and 20s and 30s. And there's often so much unprocessed grief, and oftentimes they also don't necessarily feel they don't want to burden their loved ones by putting that grief onto them. And so they come in here in this safe space with the supportive therapists and the medicine, and it's really this unbridled expression of deep, deep pain. And we've seen some patients cry like almost the entire 6 to 8 hours. But after, they report feeling a lot lighter. They feel they had a different perspective on their grief. They've let something go, and they often talk about being more able to live with the remaining time that they have.
So there's traditional psychotherapy that can sometimes take years for people to make progress and to get in touch with some of these feelings. Do you find with psilocybin therapy it kind of speeds the process up?
I certainly think that psychedelic therapy catalyzes the therapeutic process. Right. So I do think we might see gains faster in psychedelic therapy. And it also seems to facilitate people going deeper, quicker. But the other thing that psilocybin does, for example, is it really induces the state of neuroplasticity in the brain. So if we take the example of some of my depressed patients, for example, like they really, really struggle with something that many of us take for granted, like going for a walk. Like actually for them, going for a walk when you have severe depression is really, really hard. But what we see is that the psilocybin disrupts behavior and it gives them like a reset. And then it might just be a lot easier the day after the psilocybin to then be able to go for that walk. Yeah. But then we work with them really closely in the integration period because their brain is in this changeable state, and changeable is neutral. So we have to direct that change into positive outcomes by really supporting them to make new choices, to try new things. Yeah. We call it behavioral activation.
So this is probably a good time for my favorite analogy. Yeah. I know you've heard this one a bunch of times, but it's sort of picture like a ski hill, right? Where you have all of these well-worn tracks, these grooved in ways of thinking for people that can be often toxic and negative and kind of inescapable. But psilocybin and the experience of it is kind of like putting down a fresh coat of snow. And so they can kind of think differently and move to different places. Is that a helpful analogy here to figure this out?
I think so. Like when we see a lot of the disorders that psilocybin seems to work for are places where people are really stuck in repetitive thought patterns and maladaptive behaviors. And there's this stuckness, and as much as they're trying really hard, they have a hard time shifting how they're thinking, feeling, and acting. And so what that coat of snow is with the psychedelic is that the psychedelic introduces neuroplasticity, and then along with the therapeutic support, it's like you get that fresh coat of snow, but the therapeutic support is teaching them how to ski in a different direction. And that's why it's really not just the medicine, but the entire treatment that's so important.
Now those patterns of thinking that are now, you've got this fresh coat of snow, do they return for people?
They can, yeah, and that's something that we're still really learning in the field. So with with some of the depression research, we're seeing that the effects, for some patients, they get better and stay better, but for others, it seems to come back after a few weeks or a few months.
When these old thought patterns come back, do people sometimes respond to them differently? Do they see these thoughts as different things than they once were?
Yeah, I would say that what I've seen is that, like, even if some of the old thinking comes back, people are less identified with it. Okay. And they can see it more for what it is. And now they have these new tools and strategies that have developed in that integration period for dealing with it. So even when it comes back, it's often not as severe, and they're better resourced to be able to handle it.
To almost push away those thoughts sometimes.
Yeah, or just even be able to notice them without identifying with them, so that they're more likely to just be able to pass through their consciousness as opposed to be embedded.
So yeah, we're going to get in the weeds here a little bit.
Sure.
But there's your thoughts, and then there's you. And a lot of times it's easy to think you are your thoughts. So in this case, people have these thoughts and are not identifying with them as strongly. Yeah. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, so what we know from some of the research is that psilocybin increases mindfulness. And so that increases the ability to be the witness or the observer of your thoughts, as opposed to actually being lost or identified with the thoughts. And we know mindfulness-based therapies are really helpful for a variety of mental illnesses.
So I found I'm going to bring me into this just for a second. We'll probably cut this out. I find in my worst moments, I can feel like my mind is a million miles away from my body. Like I'm just completely caught up in those tumbling patterns. Does this therapy help people bring themselves back to their body?
Yes, very much so. So one of the things that we really see with psilocybin is it increases a sense of embodiment, and it helps people get out of their head and more into the body. And so we have certain integrative practices that we encourage people to kind of build that connection with their body and being more inside. We really see with the psilocybin that it opens people, both to themselves, but also to the world around them. And I'm always fascinated, again and again, people come out of these psilocybin experiences with this increased connection to our planet, and with this sort of environmental drive to do more for our planet, and wanting to spend time with the trees, with the waters, with the earth. And it's really beautiful to watch.
I feel like we're coming up with a few lessons here. One is feel your feelings.
Yes.
You know, easier said than done.
The only way through is through.
The only
way
through
out is through.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other one is a lot of pain comes from kind of self-reference. And the more you can stop thinking about yourself, the more you can actually be free to be in the world a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that, like, you know, it's liberating to feel connected. You're still connected to yourself, but also feeling connected to everything else. So many of our patients and even our society, people feel a lot of loneliness and isolation, and that, I think, intensifies and perpetuates people's suffering. And so to come out of these experiences more open, more willing and able to engage with other people in the world around them is a big part of how this heals people.
So you see a lot of people 6 months, even a year after doing a single dose of psilocybin, perhaps saying they feel less lonely.
Yes, and we encourage, so at our center, we're developing an ongoing integration group so that there's a built-in community so that people can continue to come in an indefinite way and connect with others that have had these experiences. So building in community into the integration process for people is also part of it.
You mentioned mystical experiences.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of having these very real spiritual or mystical experiences, is this offering people something that can permanently change them?
I think we are seeing that, you know, when we think about spirituality in the context of psychedelics, I think of it really, really broadly and in just connecting to something bigger than yourself. For some people, that's creativity, community, nature, meaning and purpose. And for some people, it's a faith in a particular God. Mm-hmm. And what we see is that the medicines seem to open people to that spiritual realm, and this is a level on which the healing is happening. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes those shifts can be permanent, and most people report that that's a really positive thing for them.
So getting rid of the ego can really help people heal. Getting rid of yourself.
Quieting these repetitive thoughts that keep us stuck allows us to these deeper states of connection.
I feel like some people could relate to that even if they have never done this. I think some of I mean, you mentioned a ski hill. Mm-hmm. When you're actually skiing, it's really enjoyable because you're going down a hill and you're not in your head and you're in the world. I like playing hockey every week because I'm out playing hockey. I think a lot of the activities people like to do are naturally these things that get you out of your head and into the world.
Yeah, like people talk about the idea of a flow state where the mind's quieter, time kind of suspends, and you're just really present. And I think that's the other offering that psychedelics bring us, is that they help us become more in the present moment, which is actually where life happens. A lot of mental illness people are stuck in the past or projecting into an anxious future. And it's here in the present is where the richness of life actually lives.
Psychedelic-assisted therapy is being applied to a wide range of mental disorders. I'm going to name a few. You can add a few more to the list if you want. Depression, anxiety related to terminal health diagnoses, anorexia most recently, OCD. Do we want to add a few more to there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really good for disorders, especially psilocybin, we're seeing where the mind is stuck in those repetitive thought patterns. So that would be like obsessive compulsive disorder, the perfectionism and eating disorders like anorexia, the rumination and depression. Then it's also really good for disorders where we need to disrupt the behavioral pattern. So substance use disorders, it's showing really promising results. They had a pilot study. It's still very early research, but in a pilot study for tobacco addiction, they found at 6 months, 80% of people had quit smoking and were no longer smoking, which is way higher percentage than other treatments for smoking cessation, and we're getting good results for alcohol use disorder as well. And there's some really interesting work going on with opiates and the opiate crisis. So that would be that. And then you mentioned end-of-life distress. It really seems to help people grapple with dying and the dying process. I had one mother who was dying, and before she took the psilocybin, she couldn't even tell her kids that she was dying, like it was too painful. And in the experience, she experienced her own death. She felt that she was dying into love, and she totally lost her fear of death after that. She started being able to talk to her kids, say goodbye to people, and it really profoundly changed the last 6 months of her life, where she said, I'm no longer living treatment to treatment. I'm actually living to live. And it was just a very meaningful experience for her.
And we're seeing these stories happen often in terms of
the end of life. That's one area of research that we're really focused on here. We have a partnership with Princess Margaret Hospital, and in science we call the effect size, which is how effective an intervention is, and it's so high in the end of life population. So that's one area where this seems to be really, really promising.
So you have all these different categories of mental illness. The DSM, which is psychiatry's Bible, separates them. Are we learning through these therapies that there is kind of this common underlying mechanism to a lot of mental illness?
I think that there's a lot of interesting work kind of grappling with that question. Again, a lot of the disorders come down to these maladaptive thinking and maladaptive behavior. And then by bringing in the psychedelic with therapy, so neuroplasticity plus support seems to disrupt the stuck thinking and behaviors that are really at the heart of a lot of different mental illnesses. And I think that sense of connection and getting people more connected, it doesn't matter what mental illness you have, feeling more connected is healing for people.
So how deep are we into studying these types of therapies?
So we're officially in this psychedelic renaissance, as they like to call it. There was a lot of work, even work done in Canada in the 1950s and 60s, and they were getting really promising results. But then because of the war on drugs, that all got shut down for over 30 years.
Yeah, I think in Saskatchewan, you could qualify for government-funded LSD therapy for alcoholism.
Yeah,
during that time
there was
period,
some really interesting work going on in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, with Humphrey Osmond, who's a British psychiatrist who was studying psychedelics here in Canada. And I would say over the last 10 years, we've just seen an explosion. There's research centers popping up all over the world, lots of really interesting work going on. It's still early days. There's way more that we don't know than what we know. It's important to remain really humble. I think it's not a magic bullet. I tell people you're stepping onto a healing path, but it's a type of therapy where it shows you what's inside, and you have to then do the hard work of processing that and making the changes. And so there's a lot that we need to learn still about challenging experiences and adverse events and that kind of thing that's coming out. But it's a very exciting time to be studying this area.
So we're in this psychedelic renaissance. How hopeful are you for the future of this?
I like to say I'm cautiously optimistic. Generally speaking, I'm really hopeful. I got into this field originally because we needed better treatments for our patients. I saw that I was taught this host of therapies and meds, and yet there was this, a chunk of patients that our treatments just didn't work for. And so we need better treatments, and this to me is a really promising area of mental health research. So I feel very hopeful for the future.
Well, thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much for coming.
Tomorrow on the agenda.
Schreiner has said, he's all for the government taking his ideas.
That happens all the time, frankly. Opposition members will put forward bills. The government likes some of the ideas, but they don't want to give the opposition credit, so they'll literally steal the idea. That's tomorrow on the agenda.